Let It Be is the 12th and final studio album released by the English rock band The Beatles. It was released on May 8, 1970 by the band's Apple Records label shortly after the group announced their breakup. Most of Let It Be was recorded in January 1969, before the recording and release of the album Abbey Road. For this reason, some critics and fans, such as Mark Lewisohn, argue that Abbey Road should be considered the group's final album and Let It Be the penultimate. Let It Be was originally intended to be released before Abbey Road during mid-1969 as Get Back, but the Beatles were unhappy with this version, which was mixed and compiled by Glyn Johns, and it was temporarily shelved. A new version of the album was created by Phil Spector in 1970 and finally released as Let It Be, serving as the album for the 1970 motion picture of the same name. While 3 songs from the sessions were released as singles before the album's release, Get Back / Don't Let Me Down, and Let It Be, the songs were remixed by Spector for the album and Don't Let Me Down was not included. Despite a mixed review from Rolling Stone magazine at the time of its release, the album was ranked number 86 in the magazine's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time in 2003. This was, however, adjusted to number 392 in the 2012 version. Let It Be. Naked was released in 2003, an alternative version of the album stripping much of Phil Spector's production work and using some different versions of songs. History, concept. By late 1968, more than 2 years after the Beatles gave up touring, Paul McCartney was eager for the group to perform live again. The sessions for that years the Beatles had seen a number of serious arguments and strained relations among the group. McCartney felt that the group's cohesiveness had been lost through years without playing live, and from using the studio not to record ensemble performances but to make increasingly complex recordings made up of parts played individually by each Beatle as overdues rather than as a group. He believed that the best way to improve band relations and revive enthusiasm was to get the group back into rehearsal as quickly as possible and begin work on a new album that made little or no use of studio artifice or multiple overdubbing. This would allow the group to return to their roots by playing as a true ensemble, perhaps recording some or all of the new album during a one-off live concert or full concert tour. This idea mirrored the back-to-basics attitude of a number of rock musicians at this time in reaction against the psychedelic and progressive music dominant in the previous 2 years. McCartney believed that a return to live performance would reinstill the same sort of ensemble spirit and sense of unity that they had in their early years together. McCartney also decided to invite producer-engineer Glyn Johns to contribute to the recording. His proposed role was apparently not clearly defined, as McCartney also wished to retain the services of George Martin. As a result, Johns was not entirely sure whether he was supposed to be producing the album or merely engineering it, with Martin having no clear idea of where he stood either. The other 3 Beatles were less enthusiastic about McCartney's proposals. They had just completed 5 months' work on their previous album and were skeptical about the prospects of returning to live performance. George Harrison in particular was very opposed to the idea of touring, having taken the strongest dislike out of any in the group due to the grueling tours of the Beatlemania era. However, he had recently enjoyed a series of jam sessions with Bob Dylan and the band in the US, rediscovering his liking for straightforward ensemble playing, and he was attracted to the idea of the back-to-basics approach. The same approach greatly appealed to John Lennon, who had grown increasingly wary of what he regarded as the excessive technical artifice used on their recordings since Revolver and had also made a recent return to no-frills ensemble playing in the shape of an appearance on the Rolling Stones' Rock and Roll Circus. In addition, all the group members had greatly enjoyed the recording of Lennon's song Happiness is a Warm Gun during the recent White Album sessions which, due to its multiple sections and myriad times signature changes, had required the Beatles to focus sharply and revive their ensemble playing skills to lay down a coherent basic rhythm track before any overdubbing could be applied. In the end, the group agreed to convene for rehearsals immediately following New Year's Day 1969 to begin work, even though no suitable conclusion or even firm direction for the new project had been agreed upon. Conflicts. The rehearsals and recording sessions for the album did not run smoothly. The acrimony that began during the recording of the previous year's The Beatles album, resumed soon after the rehearsals began. the Beatles were not getting along, and Lennon and McCartney weren't working together as before. McCartney assumed the role of the leader, while a laid-back Lennon was more interested in spending time making music with his soon-to-be wife Yoko Ono, who was now present in the studio with him at all times. All of the factors led to friction within the band. At one point, Harrison walked out and quit the group after several arguments with McCartney and a severe fallout with Lennon, due to the former's perfectionism and the latter's increasing lack of interest in the band. Harrison was eventually coaxed back a few days later. A film version is famous for showcasing a number of conflicts between the group members and has frequently been referred to as a documentary intended to show the making of an album but instead showing the breakup of a band. Twickenham rehearsals. Since all the rehearsals were to be filmed by Michael Lindsay Hogg and his film crew, the decision was made to use a film studio for rehearsals and the soundstage at Twickenham Studios was chosen. The group began rehearsals there on January 2, 1969. Sound recordings were made on Negra mono recorders solely for the purpose of the film soundtrack. No professional multi-track recordings were made of these sessions as the Beatles were simply rehearsing for a proposed live performance. Phil Spector later used a snippet of dialogue from one of these rehearsals to introduce For You Blue on the finished album. Numerous bootleg records taken from the many hours of these soundtrack recordings are in wide circulation and various bits of music and dialogue from the same source were eventually used on the second disc of the 2003 release Let It Be. Naked. The rehearsals quickly disintegrated into acrimony. Unable to generate much enthusiasm or focus their attention, the Beatles' playing was largely ragged and unprofessional, not helped by the fact that they were severely out of practice at playing as a live ensemble. McCartney tried to organize and encourage his bandmates, but his attempts to hold the band together and rally spirits were seen by the others as controlling and patronizing. Matters came to a head on January 6, when Harrison had a heated argument with McCartney during a rehearsal of Two of Us, which later became one of the most famous sequences in the Let It Be film. What is not shown in the film is another, allegedly much more severe argument Harrison had with Lennon on January 10. Harrison had become fed up with Lennon's creative and communicative disengagement from the band and the two had a blazing row. According to journalist Michael Hujago of the Daily Sketch, this descended into violence with Harrison and Lennon allegedly throwing punches at each other, though in a January 16 interview for the Daily Express, Harrison said, "There was no punch-up. We just fell out." After lunch, Harrison announced that he was leaving the band now, and told the others see you round the clubs. He promptly walked out, getting in his car and instead of returning home to his wife Patty at his Esher home Kinfauns, he drove straight to his parents' home in Warrington near Liverpool. After Harrison's departure that afternoon, the three remaining Beatles attempted to continue the rehearsal. As a practical solution to the problem of Harrison's absence, Lennon suggested hiring Eric Clapton to replace Harrison, possibly as a full-time member of the Beatles if Harrison stuck with his decision to quit the band permanently. McCartney and Starr vetoed this suggestion, with the former arguing that the group could not truly be considered as the Beatles without all four original members of the band. Recording sessions. A week later the band agreed to Harrison's terms for returning to the group, which included abandoning the cold and cavernous soundstage at Twickenham. Sessions resumed on January 22 when the Beatles moved to Apple Studios. Multi-track recording began on that date and continued until January 31. Harrison brought in keyboardist Billy Preston to ease tensions and supplement the band for the live performances. Preston worked with the Beatles throughout their stay at Apple Studios. The live concert idea culminated with the Beatles and Preston performing on January 30 on the rooftop of the Beatles' Apple building at 3 Savile Row before a small audience of friends and employees. The performance was cut short by the police after complaints about noise. The complete concert has circulated among bootleg collectors for many years. 3 numbers recorded at the rooftop concert, Dig a Pony, I've Got a Feeling, and One After 909, do appear on the album, while several spoken parts of the concert appear between tracks that were recorded in studio. The band played hundreds of songs during the Get Back Let It Be sessions. Aside from original songs ultimately released on the Let It Be album, There were early versions of many songs that appeared on Abbey Road, including Mean Mr. Mustard, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, Sun King, Polythene Pam, Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, Something, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, Oh Darling, Octopus's Garden, and I Want You. Still others would eventually end up on Beatles solo albums, including Lennon's Jealous Guy, and Gimme Some Truth, Harrison's All Things Must Pass, Isn't It a Pity, Let It Down, and Hear Me Lord, and McCartney's Another Day, Teddy Boy, Junk, and The Back Seat of My Car. Much of the band's attention was focused on a broad range of covers, extended jams on 12-bar blues, and occasional new efforts such as Lennon's Uncompleted Madman. These included classical pieces such as Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings, jazz standards such as Ain't She Sweet, and an encyclopedic array of songs from the early rock and roll era such as Stand By Me, Words of Love, Lonely Sea, bar copyrights Say Mucho by Mexican composer Consuelo Vila ZQUEZ and Blue Suede Shoes. Multiple Bob Dylan songs were also played, including Positively 4th Street, All Along the Watchtower, and I Shall Be Released. Only a handful of these were complete performances. The vast majority were fragmentary renditions with at most a verse or two of misremembered lyrics. The rehearsals and recording sessions were filmed and formed the basis of the Beatles film of the same name. 2 songs appearing on the album were not recorded during the Apple Studios sessions. Across the Universe had been recorded at EMI Studios in February 1968, and I Me Mine was not recorded until January 1970 after John Lennon's unannounced departure from the group. Lewisohn recognizes I Me Mine as the final song to be recorded by the Beatles before their official dissolution. Additional overdubbing of vocals and instrumentation for other tracks on Let It Be continued into April 1970, a mere month before the album's release. Get Back albums. After increasing use of overdubs and multi-layered recordings on recent albums, there was at first a consensus to record the new album live. In keeping with the Back to Roots concept, the cover artwork was planned to be an update of the cover of their first album, Please Please Me, with the band looking down the stairwell of EMI's headquarters office block in Manchester Square, London. A different photograph from the same photo session was later used on the compilation album 1967–1970. Days after the sessions at Apple ended, engineer Glyn Johns put together a rough mix acetate of several songs, for the band to listen to. A tape copy of this acetate made its way to America where it was played on radio in September 1969. In March 1969, Lennon and McCartney called Johns to EMI and offered him free rein to officially compile an album from the Get Back recordings. Johns booked time at Olympic Studios between March 10 and May 28 to mix the album and completed the final banded master tape on May 28. Only one track, One After 909, was taken from the rooftop concert, with I've Got a Feeling, and Dig a Pony being studio recordings instead. Johns also favored earlier, rougher versions of Two of Us, and Let It Be over the more polished performances from the final January 31 session. It also included a jam called Rocker, a brief rendition of the Drifters' Save the Last Dance for Me, Lennon's Don't Let Me Down, and a 5-minute version of Dig It. Acetates were prepared for the Beatles, who were not really interested in the project any longer. At least one copy of this acetate made its way to America and was aired on radio stations in Buffalo, New York, and Boston in September. Get Back version 1, May 1969, Side 1, The One After 909, Rocker, Save the Last Dance for Me, Don't Let Me Down, Dig a Pony, I've Got a Feeling, Get Back, Side 2, For You Blue, Teddy Boy, Two of Us, Maggie May, Dig It, Let It Be, The Long and Winding Road, Get Back. The Get Back album was intended for release in July 1969, but its release was pushed back to September to coincide with the planned television special and the theatrical film about the making of the album. In September, the album's release was pushed back to December because the Beatles had just recorded Abbey Road and wanted to release that album instead. By December the album had been shelved. On December 15, The Beatles again approached Glyn Johns to compile an album from the Get Back tapes, but this time with the instruction that the songs must match those included in the as yet unreleased Get Back film. Between December 15, 1969 and January 8, 1970, new mixes were prepared. Glyn Johns' new mix omitted Teddy Boy as the song did not appear in the film. It also added Across the Universe, and I Me Mine, on which only McCartney, Harrison and Ringo Starr performed. I Me Mine was newly recorded on January 3, 1970, as it appeared in the film and no multi-track recording had yet been made. The Beatles once again rejected the album. Get Back version 2, January 1970, Side 1, the one after 909, Rocker, Save the Last Dance for Me, Don't Let Me Down, Dig a Pony, I've Got a Feeling, Get Back, Let It Be, Side 2, For You Blue, Two of Us, Maggie May, Dig It, The Long and Winding Road, I Me Mine, Across the Universe, Get Back, completion and release. In March 1970, the session tapes were given to American producer Phil Spector. Spector worked on the tracks and compiled the eventually released album a year by now entitled Let It Be. The album and the film with the same name were released on May 8, 1970. The Beatles had already broken up by that time. A film captured the critical tensions within the band, and also included footage from the rooftop concert. The rooftop performance closed with the song Get Back, and afterwards Lennon said, "I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we passed the audition." The joke was added to the studio version of the song that appeared on the album. Several songs from the recording sessions have been released officially in versions different from those on the Let It Be album. Get Back / Don't Let Me Down, and Let It Be were released as singles in 1969 and 1970, respectively. 7 tracks were live performances, in accordance with the original album concept, I've Got a Feeling, One After 909, and Dig a Pony from the rooftop performance, and Two of Us, Dig It, Get Back, and Maggie May from studio sessions. Contrary to the original concept, the album versions of For You Blue, I Me Mine, Let It Be, and The Long and Winding Road feature editing, splicing and/or overdues. Don't Let Me Down, also recorded live and previously released as the B-side of Get Back, was not included on the album. The 12th track on the album is an edited version of the original 1968 recording of Across the Universe, slowed down from D natural to D flat, which had only been rehearsed at Twickenham and not professionally recorded on multi-track tape during the January 1969 sessions. McCartney was deeply dissatisfied with Spector's treatment of some songs, particularly The Long and Winding Road. McCartney had conceived of the song as a simple piano ballad, but Spector dubbed an orchestral and choral accompaniment. McCartney unsuccessfully attempted to halt release of Spector's version of the song or at least have it altered. Despite the criticisms leveled at Spector over the years for his handling of the material, Lennon defended him in his 1971 Rolling Stone interview, saying, "He was given the shittiest load of badly recorded shit with a lousy feeling to it ever, and he made something of it." In the UK and Canada, the album was originally issued by Apple in a lavish box that also included a book featuring stills from the Let It Be film. Several months later, the album was reissued in a standard LP jacket, sans book. In the United States, the Let It Be album was issued in a gatefold cover, without the book. Original American copies of Let It Be bore the Apple Records label, but because United Artists distributed the film, United Artists Records held the rights to distribute LP copies of the album in America. To indicate that Let It Be was not distributed by Capitol, the Apple logo and record label in America sported a red apple, rather than the Beatles' usual green Granny Smith apple. In early 1976, when the Beatles' EMI contract expired, the group's catalog in the U.S. transferred from Apple to Capitol. Let It Be, however, went out of print in America for 3 years. In 1979, Capitol EMI acquired United Artists Records. With this acquisition, Capitol acquired the rights to 2 Beatles albums previously distributed in the U.S. by United Artists, Let It Be and the soundtrack album A Hard Day's Night. Shortly after acquiring United Artists Records, Capitol reissued both UA-distributed Beatles albums on the Capitol label. The album was first released on CD on October 19, 1987. Along with the other Beatles albums, EMI released a remastered CD on September 9, 2009 and an electronic version on December 4, 2009. Most critics felt that the sound was significantly improved over the 1987 CD, given the superior digital transfer technology available in 2009. The Beatles won the Academy Award for the Best Original Song Score in 1970 for the songs in the film Let It Be, Naked. At the same time the film's re-release was announced, McCartney announced plans to release a new version of the album that is closer to what he had originally intended for the project. The new collection, Let It Be, Naked, was released on November 17, 2003, in a 2-disc format. The second disc contained fly-on-the-wall recordings of the band chit-chatting during the Get Back sessions. The songs were remixed from the original multitrack recordings. The recording did not contain the humorous spoken passages and lavish orchestral overdues from Let It Be. The album received mixed reviews, some critics praising the simpler remixes and others expressing disappointment that the new album lacked the fun and humor of Let It Be. Reception: although Let It Be would earn the top spot on both the American and British record charts, with the Let It Be single and The Long and Winding Road also reaching number 1 in the US, the album was met with mixed reviews at the time of its release. The NME critic Alan Smith wrote, "If the new Beatles soundtrack is to be their last, then it will stand as a cheapskate epitaph, a cardboard tombstone, a sad and tatty end to a musical fusion which wiped clean and drew again the face of pop." Rolling Stone magazine was also critical of the album, citing Spector's production embellishments as a sore point. "Musically, boys, you passed the audition. In terms of having the judgment to avoid either overproducing yourselves or casting the fate of your Get Back statement to the most notorious of all overproducers, you didn't." Track listing: personnel, The Beatles, George Harrison lead and rhythm guitars, acoustic guitar on For You Blue, and I Me Mine, timbre on Across the Universe, tuned down 6-string electric guitar on Two of Us, and Maggie May, lead vocals on I Me Mine, and For You Blue, backing vocals. John Lennon lead and backing vocals, rhythm guitar, lead guitar on Get Back, lap steel guitar on For You Blue, acoustic guitar on Two of Us, Across the Universe, and Maggie May, 6-string bass guitar on Dig It, Let It Be, and The Long and Winding Road, whistling on Two of Us. Paul McCartney lead and backing vocals, bass guitar, acoustic guitar on Two of Us, and Maggie May, piano on Dig It, Across the Universe, Let It Be, The Long and Winding Road, and For You Blue, Hammond organ and electric piano on I Me Mine, maracas on Let It Be. Ringo Starr drums, percussion on Across the Universe. Additional musicians: Richard Anthony Hughes on string and brass arrangements on I Me Mine, and The Long and Winding Road, John Bahama choral arrangements on Across the Universe, I Me Mine, and The Long and Winding Road, George Martin shaker on Dig It, string and brass arrangements on Let It Be. Production: Linda McCartney backing vocals on Let It Be, Billy Preston electric piano on Dig a Pony, I've Got a Feeling, One After 909, The Long and Winding Road, and Get Back, Hammond organ on Dig It, and Let It Be. Brian Rogers string and brass arrangements on Across the Universe. Production: Glyn Johns audio engineering, mixing, Alan Parsons assistant engineer, Phil Spector reproducer, final mixing, covers. The album's songs have been covered by numerous performers including American Idol 8 winner Chris Allen, Aretha Franklin, Brooke White, Katie Stevens, Boney M., Joan Baez, George Michael, Willie Nelson, Pearl Jam, David Bowie, Fiona Apple, Billy Ocean, Elvis Presley, Diana Ross, Status Quo, Seether, Stereophonics, Rod Stewart, Jennifer Hudson, and Widespread Panic. In addition, the Slovenian group Shelved covered the entire album except for the title track. Charts and certifications, notes. References: Lewisohn, Mark. The Beatles recording sessions. New York, Harmony Books. ISBN A0-517-57066-1. Lewisohn, Mark. The Complete Beatles Chronicle. Chancellor Press. ISBN A0-7607-0327-2. MacDonald, Ian. Revolution in the Head. Chicago Review Press. ISBN A978-1-55652-733-3. The RS 500 Greatest Albums of All Time. Rolling Stone. November 18, 2003. Retrieved December 10, 2007. Schweigart, Ray. Sulpy, Doug. Get Back, The Unauthorized Chronicle of the Beatles' Let It Be Disaster. New York, St. Martin's Griffin. ISBN A0-312-19981-3. Sulpy, Doug. Schweigart, Ray. Get Back, The Unauthorized Chronicle of the Beatles' Let It Be Disaster. New York, St. Martin's Press. ISBN A0-312-15534-4. External links, recording data and notes, The Lost Beatle Tapes / The Making of Let It Be, The British Beatles Fan Club.